Welcome back, brush fantasy friends. I have a process video for you today with a voiceover. Super excited. Start with my Princeton snap brushes. I got 3 sizes. They're detail brushes, so they are pretty small. My dynamic distraction brush. This one I'm going to use for mixing. It picks up a lot of water and pigment, so. My EtchrLab paints, we're going to use Prussian blue and dark brown to make gray. Let's get started. So again, dynamic distraction brush. I love them for picking up pigment, and they do hold quite a bit of paint. It's my general go-to for mixing. The Prussian blue and dark brown that I like to mix up, I actually got from Louise DeMasi. I was following along on one of her tutorials on YouTube, and it was just a very beautiful, beautiful gray. I'm going to put a light wash over most of the face. I do have masking fluid over all of the areas that I want to keep highlighted, so I don't need to worry too much about keeping to certain places. I can just do the wash as I feel. What's great about this gray too is that it has like a bluish tint to it, which will be really nice when we start doing the shiny part of the fur. This is where I start on the ear. I'm using my tiniest brush. I believe this is my 0 snap. Another one of my favorite YouTubers is Emily Fave, and she used a Princeton snap. So I wanted to give it a try. So this is the second layer. It's mostly the shadows. I'm still trying to keep to the texture of the fur. So if you notice, I flick the brush quite a bit, and that's gonna give it that fur shape. Starting on the nose, we put a little bit more of a sky blue in it as the kind of first layer to the nose, because the shiny part of the nose based on the photograph looks blue, but it's probably more a trick of the light. I'm zooming in, try to get a view of the nose. I think this is still my student grade paper, so it actually dries pretty quickly. I'm starting the little bit of detail to the nose, just giving it the black lining, the shape, so the shadows. This is a little bit of a bigger bellied brush. It's probably a 2, and I'm just moving the paint around a little bit with a wet brush and blending it into the blue so there's no harsh line. and I'm working with it quickly while it is wet. Otherwise, if it dries, that line will stay there and be extremely dramatic. So while the paint is wet, I quickly and hurriedly sweep at it and flick it out to get those hairlines. I think overall this piece went to maybe 9 hours. Got the dynamic distraction brush again. This is just wetting the paper down before I add the color to it. It's just to get the colors to smooth over the whole surface and not have harsh lines. So I'm just kind of putting it on over. This is also a base layer, so I'm not focusing on the texture of the fur whatsoever. It's more just the underneath, the more details. Again, there's masking fluid all over the areas that I want to keep white, so I don't have to worry about it. I can just keep going and going and going. Interesting enough, the paws on this dog were from a different picture, a different dog altogether, because this guy is actually laying in grass. So I had to find different references for his feet. The base layer is always fun when you have masking fluid, because you can just go crazy with it. Masking fluid is not fun though. Adding a little bit of the shadow. It's a soft shadow for sure. Like, I'm pretty much just doing a base layer to kind of get a guide. Again, this was like my second black dog that I had done, so I was nervous to add dark colors. So there are several layers to this, just building up and building up to where I would be comfortable. So this dog was a commission, a friend of an aunt's. The aunt had reached out and gotten of a puppy that had passed. Actually, it was very sad. She was 16 years old, I believe. And my aunt's friend saw the portrait I did of the loved one, and she wanted one of her dog, and so that is how this commission came into play. Very fortunate, because this is still a learning process for me. I believe I charged $10 an hour for this one, and like I said, it took about 9 hours. Luckily there was no time limit, so even though it takes 9 hours, it was more like a month. His little collar was cute. Luckily the collar itself was very simplistic, but the little pendant that he had, I did end up writing his name on there. Very, very tiny. Adding a little bit more to the face. It looks like he has a lot of wrinkles, but really it's just the angle of his face. So I'm trying to get the shape of his face and ears separated. So there's a little bit of wave to it. Trying out the Princeton snap brushes was interesting. For myself, I didn't feel like they could hold a lot of water. But to give them credit, they are smaller brushes. These are just the base layers of the muzzle. I feel like I had a lot of trouble with the muzzle. With black fur, you really have to find those highlight areas and keep them shaped. I don't know how to explain it. To get the paint to go a certain direction. I'm adding a little bit of that sky blue again to his face, so we can try to get those highlights. This is like layer number 3, I think. Again, I was so nervous adding color. I just didn't want to go too dark, because with watercolor you cannot go backwards, unfortunately, because it's a transparent medium. Here's the shape of the chest, so I need to keep certain parts very dark and then other parts lighter where the light is hitting. This is probably layer number 3 as well, but because he's a black dog, there are quite a few more layers to it. Just picking up a lot of the paint, the dark pigment, and then just swooshing it out and trying to get that texture. It's crazy, or watching this happen, because this was like almost 2 years ago. These little tufts here. I did have fun painting this piece. I learned a lot about fur. I actually did a lot of research prior to painting this. I watched a lot of YouTube tutorials on black fur, and I also just went online and looked at other art pieces and other dogs that had been painted in watercolor and mapped out what I was going to attempt myself. So even though I'm following a photograph, I did do some sketch pieces of this prior. I sketched it out on just regular paper and then just painted quickly where the shadows were and how I might try to do the fur texture. And when I liked that one, I went ahead and sketched it out on the watercolor paper. Layer number 4, this is just more of the shadow of the chest, trying to get it darker. I don't know if you can see that space there on the chest where there's a little bit of a gap. I just go back and forth a little bit and creating that fur, like a stripage almost, so that way there's texture there but a highlight left behind. The other parts that are masked in the masking fluid, those will be white. But the chest section, it is lighter, but it's not white, and that's why I keep going back over across it, but not filling it in completely. Here's the more flicks of the brush. If you notice the arm, I go smoothly down on one side, and yet going into it, I fan out the brush quite a bit so that way I can get that fur. I have gotten lucky recently where I had a piece that needed quite a lot of editing, and I was able to use a white ink and add my paints to it and do several layers in order to tone down what I had previously painted. Getting ready to do the belly. I'm just filling it up with water in the certain sections that I want. I'm gonna miss a triangle piece here. I think if you can see it by the leg, that part is a highlight as well. Go up the belly, kind of accenting the shoulder a bit where the sun is hitting him, and that gives the arm shape, so that way it's not just solid black or crossed, and you can tell the difference between the arm and the belly. Here I'm doing those tufts again with that tiny detail brush. Wetting the leg. I just liked the softer edges, so I always wet the surface first. This is that blue tint again for a highlight. I had to kind of guess how his legs were laying because he was laying in grass. The way that the arms were, it just kind of seemed like it made sense to me that they would be crisscrossed. So I found references on Pinterest of dogs with their paws crossed, specifically black labs, so that way I could try to keep the shape and color. It's a little blurry, but you can see how I'm pulling the dark color away and bringing it into the lighter colors of fur. Doing a little bit more detail on the mouth. Bringing those little tiny hairs out. I remember being super excited about the nose and then so stressed about the mouth. That's what's great about watercolor as well, is you can hop around the picture. A dark line for the shadow, and I'm going to pull it away and build up, kind of crisscross and scratch the fur out into the rest of the leg. That's what's great about watercolor is while one section is drying, you can move to a different section of the painting and work on it, and then once the other side is dry, you can go back. I've actually worked on 3 commissions at a time. So I've done this too, where I will paint large surfaces, do the washes on one painting, leave it sit, and go to the next, work on that, leave it sit, and just keep cycling through them. Right, so I believe this is another day. The lighting is different. Like I said, it does take me some time adding more details to the paws. There's like little tiny hairs that kind of flick off, and then the nails. Getting a little braver now that I know that the base layer is good. So I'm adding darker color. He's still going to be quite a bit darker, but getting a little braver, I can see. Based on the picture, this is probably 3 or 4 hours. The leg is probably going to take an hour by itself, the leg and the back. The belly will probably be another hour. The face, depending on how hard it was, I really don't remember. I just remember the mouth. I remember being nervous that I was losing the shape of the mouth. The ears were fun. I do remember that. The front legs were fun. I never really painted animals before. I really didn't think that I was going to enjoy it as much as I do. But a friend of mine asked me to do a dog for her. And after I did it, it was just a blast trying to get all these lines and fur and that soft texture. It's a challenge that I enjoy now. And it doesn't have to be exact. I think that's the beauty of painting, is that it does not have to be picture perfect, like line for line, because you can get the basic shape of things and the eye will do the rest. We're coming on the end of the video here. I don't have the rest of the filming, but he was looking very handsome. That's the sketch and the final piece. I did have a lot of fun painting it. Learned a lot. The original sketch of the dog, you can even see its nails, and the final piece with all his highlights in the graph. Thank you for tuning in to this process video. Check out my Redbubble page for art pieces for sale, and I will see you later, my brushed fantasy friend.